Imagine a sports game where the referee can just make up rules on the spot, or where the coach of one team can decide to ignore the penalty rules. That would be chaotic and unfair. The rule of law is the opposite of that. It's the core idea that everyone, from the average citizen to the president and Congress, is subject to and accountable under the law. It means that the law is the supreme authority, not the personal desires or whims of whoever happens to be in power. It's important to understand the difference between the rule of law and merely having laws, which we call rule by law. Every dictator has laws, but under a dictator, the laws are a tool for the ruler to control the citizens. Under the rule of law, the law is above everyone, and it serves as a check on the government itself. If a government can change the rules just to benefit itself, you don't have the rule of law. You have tyranny masquerading as legality. The first main principle of the rule of law is the supremacy of law. Think of it like a chain of command where the law is at the very top. This principle means that a person can only be punished if they have clearly violated a written public law, and that violation has been proven in a court. This directly protects you from arbitrary action, like a government official saying, "I don't like your opinion, so I'm putting you in jail." The principle of equality before the law is perhaps the most visible sign of a healthy society. It means that the law must apply to everyone equally. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO of a huge corporation or a student. If you break the speed limit, you get a ticket. If this principle is ignored and powerful people can bribe their way out of consequences, trust in the whole legal system collapses, and you end up with one set of rules for the rich and another for everyone else. For the law to be supreme and equal, you must have an independent judiciary. Imagine if the president could fire a judge just because that judge ruled against the government. That judge would feel pressure to rule in favor of the president next time. An independent judiciary ensures that judges have the freedom to make decisions based purely on the evidence and the law, without fear of political retaliation from the other branches of government. Where did these ideas come from? They aren't new. One of the most important milestones is the Magna Carta, signed in England in 1215. This was a crude but crucial step where the nobles forced King John to acknowledge that even the king wasn't above the law. It contained early versions of what we call due process, and the idea that the government couldn't simply take away a person's life or property without following legal procedure. Now let's look at what the rule of law is designed to protect: human rights. These are the rights you possess simply because you are a human being. They are universal, meaning they apply to you whether you live in New York, Nairobi, or New Delhi, and they are inalienable, meaning they can't be taken away by any government. They are the moral minimums that every person deserves to live a life of dignity. So, how do the two ideas connect? It's simple. The rule of law is the machinery that ensures human rights are real. A country can write down all the rights it wants, but if it doesn't have an independent judiciary and a system of laws that applies equally to everyone, those rights are just words on paper. The rule of law makes sure that if your right to free speech is violated, you have an actual court you can go to for protection. Philosophers often talk about natural rights, the idea that you're born with rights like life and liberty. Our U.S. Declaration of Independence is based on this idea. Legal rights, on the other hand, are those rights enshrined in a country's written laws, like the right to an attorney or the right to vote. The great challenge for any democratic state is to translate those philosophical natural rights into clear, enforceable legal rights, which is exactly what a constitution attempts to do. For Americans, the most important document protecting these rights is the U.S. Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. These were added to the Constitution to explicitly limit what the government could do to you. It guarantees fundamental freedoms like the freedom of speech and the right to assemble, and it places procedural limits on the government to ensure you get fair treatment if you're accused of a crime. On the global stage, the most significant document is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. It was created by the newly formed United Nations after the horrors of World War II to make sure such atrocities never happened again. It's not legally binding on its own, but it sets a global, agreed-upon standard for all 30 basic rights that all people should strive to have protected by law in their own nations. The UDHR covers classic civil and political rights. For example, it affirms the right to life, which is the most basic human right. It also includes the freedom of thought and expression, which directly relates to our own First Amendment. Importantly, Article 7 explicitly states that all are equal before the law, directly linking the concept of human rights to the rule of law. But the UDHR goes beyond just political rights. It also includes economic and social rights. These are rights that require the government to take active steps to ensure people have a basic standard of living. This includes the right to education, the right to work under fair conditions, and the right to housing and medical care. The difference is that civil rights often require the government not to interfere, while social rights often require the government to provide for its citizens. One of the most powerful safeguards for individual rights is due process. Think about it. The government can only take away your liberty or property if it acts fairly and follows established legal procedures. The 5th and 14th Amendments guarantee this in the U.S. It means you can't just be arrested, locked up, or lose your property without a fair trial, legal notice, and the chance to defend yourself. Another vital tool from history is the right of habeas corpus. This Latin phrase literally means, "you shall have the body." It's a legal order that requires a government to bring an arrested person before a judge or a court to legally justify their detention. This right is crucial because it prevents the government from simply locking people up in secret indefinitely, making it a critical defense against tyranny and arbitrary imprisonment. The ultimate enforcer of the rule of law and human rights within a country is the power of constitutional review. Because the Supreme Court and other federal courts are independent, they can examine laws passed by Congress or actions taken by the President. If the courts decide that a law violates a constitutional right, like the freedom of speech, they have the power to strike that law down, ensuring that no branch of government can violate the rights of the people. A rule of law is particularly vital for minority groups. In a pure democracy, the majority of people could potentially vote to oppress a smaller group. However, because the Constitution guarantees equal rights and liberties, the rule of law ensures that a majority cannot simply vote away the fundamental rights of a minority. This is why the principles of justice and equality before the law are so critical for a diverse society. When the rule of law breaks down, the consequences are severe. When a government starts ignoring its own laws, it opens the door to corruption, abuse of power, and eventually dictatorship. History is filled with examples of regimes where the ruler put themselves above the law, leading to arbitrary arrests, secret police, and widespread human rights violations. A stable society depends on all citizens believing and trusting that the law will be applied fairly. The rule of law isn't just something that governments grant, it's something that citizens must demand and uphold. Your role in preserving this system is vital. This means staying informed, participating in the political process, voting, and being willing to speak out or peacefully protest when you see the law being unfairly applied or human rights being violated. The vigilance of the people is the final check against tyranny. In summary, the rule of law and human rights are two sides of the same coin. Human rights represent the ethical standards, what we should guarantee to all people. The rule of law is the legal framework, the actual system that allows those rights to be guaranteed and enforced in a practical way. Understanding this inseparable relationship is the first step toward becoming a responsible, informed, and actively engaged citizen of your country and the world.